Hours, one of the most eagerly awaited video games finally goes on sale.
Preparing to rewrite retail.
Everyone remembers Halo. I mean, just from its launch, it was destined for success. It practically created the genre of FPS on console and launched the Xbox into its current position. Just the hype for Halo 2 could be made into a documentary, as people waited in line for days, showing the vast potential of video games. It was a franchise that was deemed too big to fail by many, and even generated over $5 billion in sales. So how did a franchise that would be forever loved by many crumble into the abyss? Well, to get a full grasp of how it went wrong, you gotta understand how it all started. The year was November 2001, and Halo 1, or Halo Combat Evolved, was just released. You see, Microsoft needed a hook to get people to buy their new console, Xbox. So, the company collectively decided the best way they could achieve this would be to just create a revolutionary game. Simple, right? Well, luckily it was, as the company they hired for this impossible task was Bungie. Bungie was in charge of the creation of the Halo franchise, as they already had an extremely good track record. These included Myth and Marathon. Their choice could not be better either, considering Bungie practically created the genre of FPS on console with Halo Combat Evolved. The first Halo was so successful that it sold over 3 million copies in a single year and is credited for the success of Xbox. Halo Combat Evolved was the pinnacle of gaming at the time, as they successfully mapped out the controls for a FPS on gamepad, created a story and world building that was extremely refined, created engaging maps, interesting weapons, and their multiplayer could have up to 4 players per console with 4 consoles, which made for the best multiplayer experience. The sky was the limit for Halo, and over the course of the next 3 years, they steadily grew their fanbase and started to build their franchise, selling toys, books, and games. The demand was so high that some fans even created a TV series based off the game called Red vs. Blue that is still run today and has been on Hulu and Netflix. By the time 2004 came around, they released Halo 2, and there were lines as long as the eye could see, and the hype was unbelievable. It was on news stations, Microsoft stock was skyrocketing, and people who had never played a game in their lives were hearing about it. The game earned the hype as well, becoming the best-selling first-generation Xbox game with over 8 million copies sold. What made it do so well, you might be asking? Well, Bungie continued with improvements such as being able to party with friends, great voice integration, and continued on with what they did well with the first Halo game. But unfortunately for them, when something peaks, there's only really one way to go. When Halo 3 was released in 2007, it still had fantastic hype and a loyal fanbase, but for the first time in the game's history, it seemed like they had real competition. Call of Duty Modern Warfare dropped on Xbox around the same time Halo 3 was released, and like the first Halo, Modern Warfare created a new FPS subgenre and gamers were just enjoying it more. This caused some to start moving away from the classic arena battle types that Halo offered. Don't get me wrong though, Halo 3 was still a massive success, concluding the story arc of the first Halo, introducing the Forge, and frequently is acclaimed as one of the best games of all time. It's just, it seemed like Bungie didn't know what direction to go in afterwards. You see, while Bungie was releasing a $60 copy of Halo 3, aka Halo ODST, in a game that had nothing to do with their game, aka Halo Wars, Call of Duty was hard at work perfecting their work, releasing 3 more games with each one gaining more and more popularity and shaping the FPS genre. When Bungie finally released Halo Reach, an original game that actually related to their genre, fans started to realize the franchise was on a downfall. Not only did Halo Reach take heavy inspiration of armor abilities and starting loadouts from their biggest competitor Call of Duty, but the multiplayer gameplay was also just not well received. Armor abilities such as Jetpack, which caused crazy spot exploits for snipers, Armor Lock, which made players invincible for a period of time, and Sprint, which easily forgave mistakes, made the game extremely frustrating to play. But on top of that, the bloom or the accuracy of the guns being completely random made you feel like the game lacked skill. Halo was trying to appease to a more casual fanbase to expand, but in the process, longtime fans were starting to feel alienated. It didn't help either that after the game was released, Bungie decided to just give up on the Halo franchise altogether. This left Microsoft to make their biggest mistake on their franchise yet by hiring 343 Industries. 343 Industries was a game studio specifically made by Microsoft to expand the Halo franchise, but the game studio as a whole had no prior experience in creating other games, as I think it showed as years went by. The first game 343 Industries worked on and released was Halo 4. This was sold as a sequel to 3 and had the largest budget out of all of the Halo games so far, but it barely managed to receive mixed reviews. They were trying to cater to 2 types of people, but just ended up alienating both. You see, the multiplayer was catering to the casual player as they replicated Call of Duty's gameplay even more, this including bringing back armor abilities, loadouts that were fully customizable, perks, as well as a killstreak type of ability that allowed you to call in ordnance drops. This just alienated the players who enjoyed the gameplay from Halo 1 and 2, while the campaign was the complete opposite, and catered to the hardcore fan, making this story only make sense if you read the books and terminals, which alienated the casuals. They were stuck between maintaining their current base and expanding to a larger audience, and ended up losing players from both. Instead of learning though, they replicated the same problem but in reverse with Halo 5, where their campaign story completely swayed away from Halo 4. You see, early in the development of the game, writer Chris Schlurf, I hope I pronounced that correctly, departed to work on new projects, and they made the grave error of hiring Brian Reed. Brian Reed was responsible for almost all the comic book issues with Halo Escalation and has a terrible reputation amongst fans because of it, and rightfully so, as Halo 5's story is considered one of the worst stories in the entire series. Brian Reed disappeared after the backlash. Whether he resigned by choice or was forced out by his peers is still unknown. Fortunately, their multiplayer was well received as they went back to what made Halo popular to begin with, changing armor abilities with Spartan abilities, removing loadouts and perks, and going back to the arena style gameplay. That being said, they removed Halo 5's split screen play so they could maintain 60 FPS, but that removed the ability for family and friends to play together, alienating the casual user even more. After Halo 4 and 5 alienated both casuals and their hardcore fanbase from both of the most important features of the game, it's hard to blame anyone for jumping ship when its competition was just doing everything better. Even though 343 Industries did not start the downfall of the franchise, they were proving they could not bring it back, and the hate for the game studio was spreading rapidly. At this point, Halo was seen more or less as a joke that Microsoft refused to let die than an actual game. 343 Industries was left with one final chance to bring the game back from the dead, as Microsoft gave them 4 years to work and a check with no restrictions. It was the final hope for what was left of the Halo fanbase, as Halo Wars 2 was released and it genuinely did alright, despite not being the genre they're known for. Halo Infinite was starting to build hype as well, as they teased players with the nostalgic Combat Evolved feel, composed music that resembled what made the series popular, and brought back the art styles that Bungie was known for. It was honestly looking up for Halo, but that was until COVID hit in 2020. You see, 343 Industries was forced to move to a work-from-home company, and it took them a while to adjust. This pushed their progress back quite a bit. When they showed off their game at E3 2020, the game received such backlash for its cartoonish look that it forced the game to go back in development for another year. Delaying a game is also always the last option, since it lowers hype, wastes marketing money, and adds a lot of expenses without any revenue coming in. The cost seemed to have added up as well, considering when they finally did release Halo Infinite, it was extremely unfinished, which killed the game right on release. In today's gaming ecosystem, most games that go on to do well on launch, as it's kind of a feedback loop. If the game does well on launch, it does well on viewing platforms, which gives more players and therefore more income to make more content, which in turn gets more players, and so on. But to release a Halo game that was missing what made it Halo, such as Team Slayer, Campaign Co-op, and Forge, I mean, they had been working on Halo Infinite for more than 6 years, and they somehow couldn't even finish Co-op Campaign. It really brings up the question as to what they were doing over the course of that time. But the one thing that is for certain is the game is dead, and it's not coming back, as the Steam charts could tell you. Not to mention, it went from 200,000 viewers on Twitch at launch to now barely peaking at 4. I think a miracle now wouldn't even save Halo, and I love a good underdog story, but I genuinely believe that 343 Industries is just not capable of bringing back Halo. And at this point, I think they should just let the Halo franchise rest, as I mean, it had a good run, but it's just not worth crushing the few supporters it has left. Overall, I wouldn't even blame just 343 Industries, even though they have proved themselves to be completely incompetent. I think it's mostly on Microsoft, considering they let 343 Industries get away with sitting on their hands for 6 years and forcing the release of a game that was incomplete. It's just sad to see what they did to this franchise, and I think fans of it are just tired of getting their expectations blown to smithereens over and over again. Just let the game rest, Microsoft.